from what we see anyway right now that Rick Scott has cleared the half a point automatic recall. But I saw, as I was coming out here 15 minutes ago, it was too close to call, but obviously he's ahead as well. And that's a pretty big pickup. Bill Nelson, a long time incumbent. But I think it's also a message to incumbents who have to campaign, you have to connect with the voters. It's just amazing. Well, they're still going. I mean, you know, the president, he's still sitting there. No, better than that. I love popcorn. He has spoken to several people. I've been there. He has spoken to several people. He's still there. He and the First Lady are right there, front and center, flanked by family and friends and senior advisors and some others. It's been a pretty buoyant night there, and he's been calling. There are always surprises every election. I don't want to comment on who he's called on either side. I'm not going to comment.
Is it cheer that we just heard for DeSantis?
Can you talk a little bit?
That was before I came out.
Is he concerned about Democrat control of the House right now and Democrat control of committees?
Kind of what he could possibly work with Democrats on?
But, that's also up to the Democrats. They've shown very little appetite for working with this president all along, and I think that's in large part why there's not the kind of shellacking, as President Obama deftly put it, in 2010 when he suffered 63 grievous losses in the House, or the 54 seat loss that President Clinton suffered in 1994. It's because they've not been willing to work with this president. He was willing to do a deal on DACA and the Dreamers last January, almost a year ago, and we're still not there because they walked away from the table. Immigration reform is more than DACA. It's more than just the border wall. It's a very complex issue. They can come and make their proposals. Also, we have to keep the government running, the funding bill. We have to work on infrastructure, frankly. The president's made very clear about that. But the president doesn't want anything to happen with what's been an incredible economy through his deregulation, his tax cuts, his trade policies. Everywhere we go, we hear from job creators, job holders, job seekers. They're happy with this economy. I think that's reflected in a lot of the results tonight.
Is he concerned about this impeachment threat?
We're not really talking about it. He said yesterday they'll do what they want to do and he'll do what he needs to do. I don't know that there will be much of an appetite, Kristen, all across this country in some of these Democratic districts among the constituents for their members to be spending all of their time, or even most of their time, or a fraction of their time, investigating, instigating, trying to impeach and subpoena people. That's a decision they'll need to make, but you have to really give the voters what they want. And as far as I can tell, there aren't many voters out there who say, I'm going to give you an affirmative vote today because you've promised to investigate everybody or impeach the president. There seems to be no little appetite for that. In fact, I've hardly heard the words Russian collusion all night, and I think there's something to that. They're talking about the economy, they're talking about health care, they're talking about immigration, they certainly are talking about national security around the world. Very happy with this president's policies to try to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, which helps everyone. The remains of our fallen from Korea have been returned. This president is sanctioning Iran, sanctioning Russia when he needs to, pushing back on Assad when he gasses his people not once but twice. He showed a lot of strength and leadership around the world, and many people may not say America first, but they say stop apologizing for America.
Was it this focus on immigration that helped in the Senate tonight?
The president's tax returns via the IRS, Treasury Department. How will the administration handle that? Will you turn them over?
Well, we'll talk to the lawyers about that, Hallie. We'll see what happens. But again, if that's the first order of business, then you're going to have to ask the Democrats the question you just asked me, which is, where do you think you can work with the president and with the White House on behalf of this country? We're willing to do it, but that's also a question for them.
How are you going to foster that kind of bipartisan sentiment from this administration to a Democratic House?
Well, we've shown that we can. Just 2 weeks ago, I know you didn't feel like covering much of it for reasons I don't understand, but just in the last week or two, the president signed into law the most comprehensive, historic, bipartisan legislation in America's history on any one drug crisis, and we got billions of dollars in new funding. That passed the United States Senate 98-1. It passed the House with every single Democrat voting in favor of it. So we've shown that we prioritize issues that do gather and gain a great deal of Democratic support. Obviously, the president is trying to work with Democrats on some of his judicial and executive nominations. He probably now has a majority-proof Senate in the... I'm sorry, so sorry, it's so late, isn't it? He's got more senators, so maybe he won't need, quote, Democratic votes, but he always welcomes them. And I think that if you see some of the Democrats who are winning these House seats tonight, and you take a look at these districts, particularly the ones that have flipped Republicans to Democrats, those Democratic members are going to have to ask themselves, what did my constituents ask me to come and do? And I guarantee you, it's not to obstruct, resist, to say stop all the time, and to try to impeach and impugn and investigate.
He was criticized for focusing on the caravan so much. Do you feel like he was vindicated now?
He's criticized where? At your news outlet? Where else was he criticized?
He was criticized on several news outlets.
Oh, media. Where else was he criticized?
So are you saying that was the correct way
Answer your own question, because it's not a very good question. Where else was he criticized?
Kellyanne, was
he's been complimented for... Well, he's been complimented, though, for raising attention to the fact that we have people pouring over the border. In fact, the Customs and Border Patrol, if you ever bother to talk to them, they will tell you that people come over the border by the thousands every single day, so it may not even look that differently. But what is remarkable to many people is when you shine a light on an issue in a different way and people see it coming this way, and they say, well, you know what, maybe border security is national security. This president and the unaccompanied minor issue is the same. It's very similar to the one that President Obama faced in the summer of 2014. Congress has failed to act. They failed to act then, and they failed to act now. And in large part, Congress is mostly responsible for what happens moving forward with immigration policy in the United States of America, and they need to act. I don't think the president worries if he was vindicated or not about bringing attention to the caravan, but I think it's a major piece of news because people get to see what's happening. You've got Mexico. They've been terrific in trying to offer, third party, trying to offer a third safe country, trying to offer asylum to these individuals coming from the Northern Triangle countries, from Central America. Some of them are taking that. Some of them are saying, no, we want to come to America. So I think it's all an education for everyone to continue to look at that and not always try to boil it down to sound bites. So look, folks, the fact that we're not talking about a shellacking tonight, the fact that it took till 11 p.m. for most of your networks and print outlets to say, oh, we see now that the House will go Democratic, really tells you a lot about the president, our president, and my boss, how he doesn't repeat trends, he tends to make them. He doesn't repeat history, he tends to defy it. And it's pretty remarkable and historic, yet again, 2 years later, after he made history in an enormous way, that we're picking up in the United States Senate among entrenched incumbents who are very popular at home, like Bill Nelson in Florida, if in fact that continues to go Rick Scott's way. But certainly Joe Donnelly in Indiana, certainly a place where President Obama went and campaigned with him just this weekend, to Gary, Indiana, and certainly Claire McCaskill in Missouri.
Is there any regret, though, with the ad that was deemed too racist by Fox News, NBC, CNN?
That's a campaign ad. But you always are asking me about things that you never respectfully. Let's focus on what just happened tonight, which is voters responded, and I respect the will of the American people. We have not discussed that ad at all tonight.
What about 2020? Is this day one of the 2020 campaign tomorrow?
Oh boy, Hallie, I think everybody needs a rest, don't they?
Well, I mean,
Who's going to Paris?
Talking about it? Is he thinking about the re-elect? Is he starting on that?
One thing I would tell you about the president and the many ways that I'm proud to work for him and proud that he's the president of the United States. I will tell you, one that always struck me through this entire cycle is that when his political team would tell him, well, the party in power always loses the House and they often lose the Senate, and it's just grievous losses, and you'd show him all the, but President George W. Bush was elected twice, President Bill Clinton was elected twice, President Barack Obama was elected twice. He would routinely say, I don't want to hear about that. I don't care about that. We have to focus on making sure that he, the president, the vice president, and those who go out there and do it, can help keep the House or help keep the Senate. Get people who can vote for an agenda that is about a booming economy, that is about peace and prosperity. So he's never been as focused on his race as he was in helping them. And you saw that last night. He got back here at 2:43 a.m. after yet another day out in the campaign trail. We're all just trying to keep up with this man. It's truly remarkable.
But does the president see some of his potential challengers, Kellyanne, tonight, and the winners, whether it be Kirsten Gillibrand?
Good. I certainly hope not. I certainly don't. I hope that they win. I hope they all run. This is a great democracy, and they can all have at it with each other, and we'll just watch for a while. There's really no reason for us to respond that much to any of them. I'm sure here and there the president may weigh in on each of them, but if they're looking at 2020, then they're answering your question, Yamiche. They're not looking at 2019. I am really struck how some people, especially the one who lost, still talking about 2016. It's odd. And then the others are talking about 2020. Where was 2017 and 2018? And what are they doing in 2019? This president's been very,
lot, though, right?
but the president talks about 2016 when he goes back to places like yesterday. Some of you were there. I certainly was, where the crowds looked exactly the same. The numbers were the same. The crowds were as enthusiastic. I think in 2016 the crowds were there because they were hopeful, and I think in 2018 the crowds were there because they are grateful. They are thankful.
I guess the question is, are these midterms, does the president see these wins that the Republicans are able to pull off as some sort of, some sort of thing that he could look at to say, I'm going to keep my same message for 2020? People said that he shouldn't maybe run so hard line on immigration. There are Republicans who obviously voted because they like that hard.
Well, his message for 2020 are his accomplishments as president. That is the best message that he'll have. What did I do in office? It's not a message, it's a mission. And I think one big lesson, you just can't get around it, is that he made a difference in so many of these races. You look at Ron DeSantis in Florida, has been trailing in most of the polls, and the president helped him in the primary, certainly. I think Ron DeSantis had been down 15 points or so against a very qualified Republican opponent in that primary. And then, of course, the president going down there twice last week. The vice president been down there. Others have been down there. I think that the president made competitive some of these races. He had asked Rick Scott to run for that Senate seat a very long time ago, and Rick Scott, I think, has been a tremendous governor.
So what's the lesson then?
Well, the lesson is that there are many lessons, but the lesson is also that substance, not sound bites, matter. That just because people say things a million times doesn't make it true, and that people really do focus on policy, not personalities, and they focus on principles, not politics. So that's a great lesson, and I'm very proud of the voters for actually focusing on policy. And I think the president really made competitive so many of these Senate seats. We're up against 43 retirements, and which included the Speaker of the House. And that's really difficult for us to keep the House under those circumstances, even though Speaker Ryan is out there raising money and campaigning for candidates as well. His war room, from a number of the people here working on that, talking to his senior team. His family is around him as well, and some friends. And he's been watching with great attention, and he will remember when they're going by the counties, or he'll look at the part of the state and say, we were just there, or I remember that in 2016, or isn't that where we went a couple weeks ago? And Andy Barr race early on, as I know all of you were watching it too, was a really big marker for the night, a great bellwether, because that is a race that the president specifically went in for 2 Saturdays ago. There was no senator or governor's race at the top of the ticket. It was specifically for Andy Barr in Kentucky. And the president, he's a game day player, but he also, and he's always, he's optimistically cautious, different than cautiously optimistic. And he's the last one to say, look who just won, until they call the race, because as a great deal maker throughout his career, he knows you can walk away from the table and lose the deal at the last minute. So he always waits until the votes are called, until the race is called, watching all of your networks and looking online. But pretty happy tonight with the results. Got the vice president and the second lady next to him as well, but the president and first lady have been there basically all night. I started seeing them around 8:15, and they're still there.
What did he say to his supporters, Kellyanne, when he addressed them? Did he give a speech tonight? Did he devote?
No, there's no speech. It's just a time to watch the returns, have people.
What was
We
his
look at,
reaction?
oh, of course, we love to eat.
What did he mean about having a softer tone? He said that was a regret yesterday, that he wished he had a softer tone.
Well, he said he'd like to have a softer tone, but he really couldn't. It is necessary to have some sharp elbows once in a while, my words now, because of the way he's been treated. And a lot of the news, true news, has been ignored in favor of opinion and punditry and an obsession with collusion, delusions, and palace intrigue and things that don't matter, but things that don't matter to the voters. Definitely, we just saw that yet again. I mean, you can still cover it if you want, but it turns out the voters really are focused on the issues. All the star power in Georgia and Florida, former presidents and former vice presidents and would-be presidents, so they think campaigning with these folks, they really came up short in places like Indiana and Georgia and Florida and Missouri, and certainly in some of these other races. And in Ohio, Mike DeWine is now the governor, and the president was there helping yesterday. So I think that's a very important lesson here as well. Members of the cabinet joined us tonight as well. Not all were able to. Some were traveling.
The Attorney General here?
I didn't see him, but that doesn't mean he wasn't there. I've been running back and forth.
There was discussion after the midterms. He may leave. He may resign.
We all serve at the pleasure of the president, me included. And no, I have no announcements today. Of course I'm staying. I'm staying. Try as you have. Try as you have. I'm staying. Sorry?
You talked about...
Oh, I have no idea. I'm sure it's typical. I don't know. We haven't talked about that. We've been so focused on here.
I'm sorry. When you talked about the president's supporters this week, you talked about hope. Can you talk about hope versus the message about the board of the caravan, which is more kind of a fear-based message?
It's a fear-based message to you, to a lot of Americans. They looked at it and said, well, hold on. People have a right to come in here. In fact, we're the most generous nation in the world when it comes to immigrants. Some 33 million people have immigrated here, and they can do so legally. In fact, you can cross the border through one of the 26 ports of entry. It's those who are going between the ports of entry. And so people are welcome to come here, Mark, legally. But we also have a right to know who's here and why. And there's no question, as somebody who works on the drug crisis here every single day on behalf of the president and the nation, for which I'm enormously grateful, there's a lot of poison coming over the border. We have so much heroin and fentanyl and cocaine pouring over the border. And the president talks about that also. It doesn't get a ton of coverage. But he talks about how we have to have a border. We have to know what's coming in and then who's coming in. So I know that you all talked about fear, the Grover Sesame word of the week, I guess it's been. But there's an awful lot of hope that people see in the economy. I mean, I talk to people, we've talked to union folks are running up to us everywhere and saying, listen, we've never voted this way in our whole lives, but we were skeptical in 2016, but boy, have you delivered. People don't just feel like they have job availability or job security. They feel like they have job mobility, that they can actually find a job closer to home if that fits their family's life, or they can find a job that has better benefits.
The president said that wasn't exciting to talk about.
It is, yes. He talks about it everywhere he goes. And we got you guys to talk about it recently because you were talking about that he wasn't talking about the great economy he should have been. So, psych, we got you to talk about the economy. Thank you.
The president is going to speak about the election.
Calls this evening. Who is the president calling?
I'm not going to talk about who he's calling. He'll tell you in due time.
Can you tell us which other family members?
Of course I'll work with Senator Romney. He endorsed him. The president endorsed Senator Romney. So of course he can work with him.
Who else was at the celebration tonight besides the First Lady and the cabinet?
Well, I don't know what's been made public. Yes, family members are there. I don't know if any photos have been released, so I don't want to. I don't want to.
Is he going to hold a traditional news conference tomorrow?
His children were there. I'm not going to talk about that
Has
either.
he called Ron DeSantis to congratulate him?
I won't talk about who he's talked to tonight, but he has made several calls and received many calls, and basically has been right where he's been the whole time, reminding me a lot of 2016, where he and the vice president sitting right there watching the returns on many different screens, taking calls, receiving information inputs from staff about what's happening, what we see, what networks are calling what. So there are always some surprises in every election, but I think the surprise here really is that, yet again, Donald J. Trump defies history, defies the trends, bucks the trends, makes trends of his own. We only had 8 Senate seats for the party in power over the last 80 years or so in the midterms, and we have at least 9, 10, and 11 tonight, it looks like. So we'll see. The seats in the West still need to be called, Nevada, Arizona, and the like. But I think he's looking really good, and the president knows he's going to have to work with the Democratic Congress, but they're going to have to work with him. And we'll see who they elect as leaders. It's not lost on me that 30, 40, I lost count, but dozens of Democrats running for the House of Representatives vowed that they would not vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. We'll see if they keep that promise, or if they go back to her, who of course was a 2-term Speaker until she lost the speakership and everything else, and they lost most of everything else in 2010.
Is he prepared to work with her?
Certainly he'll work with her. He's tried here. I've seen her here a couple times, a time or two, haven't you?
Can you give us a sense of how many calls?
But look, what there's an appetite for in San Francisco is not always an appetite anywhere else in the country. If she thinks that all the U.S. citizens all across this country have an appetite for indictments and impeachments and subpoenas, there are a lot of members, new members, Democratic members, who I suspect will have a different idea, and then some Democratic House members who have survived this midterm election but know that they have to face the voters back home and explain why they voted against a tax cut a year ago that has brought bonuses or raises or both to 8 million Americans, an economic boon, these low unemployment rates among African Americans and Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, women 64 year low. And I know many people here maybe didn't think it was important to women tonight, that We have 65-year low unemployment rate among women, but boy, did it matter to them in some of these races.
Do you think you can get a second round of tax cuts passed with the Democratic House?
Yeah, what'd you have to eat?
You think you can get another
Me? Well, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising it happens for the party of power, but it's not the shellacking that President Obama described in 2010 of 63 seats, or President, I'm so old, I remember all these. So President Clinton, after 1994, a contract with America, he said, hey, I'm still relevant. So it may be disappointing, but it's not surprising.
Subpoenas, oversight, all this
Well,
stuff.
that would be disappointing too. I mean, the president said yesterday, they'll do what they want to do and he'll do what he has to do. But so far nothing has stopped the president from moving forward with the agenda for America. And he will continue to fight for that. He thinks there are still more economic gains to make, growth rates to increase, unemployment rates to lower. We know that not everybody is prospering yet, but pretty much everyone. And he's been made very clear there's always more deregulation. He's going back for another foreign trip in 3 days, less than 3 days. And he'll continue to do that as well.
Can you give us the
Last
top
one.
area of bipartisanship that he's going to pursue? Is it
One issue.
immigration? What is the top policy position he's going to try to pursue?
Well, that's really up to the Democrats too. But I think we have to look at infrastructure, immigration, obviously spending, certainly all things economic. We don't want to go backwards with these economic gains. And I think that this country tonight made very clear that the United States Senate will be a firewall to any of the reversals and blowbacks and throwbacks that the Democratic House may want to do, and what has been a very successful tax cut. I mean, I know many people were skeptical, and the critics and naysayers said, the employers will never reinvest in their workforce and their workplaces, but they have. That tax rate going from 35% to 21% has helped spur this huge economic boom. Apple's promised 20,000 new jobs here in the U.S. We're repatriating trillions of dollars of wealth that was legally parked overseas. And we are also, this president's leadership is also, he's making gains around the world. Every time he's told, don't do that, you can't do it, he does it. And the world doesn't fall apart, thank God. Don't pull out of the Paris Accords. Don't keep the promise of 5 or 6 presidents and move that embassy to Jerusalem and recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital the way Israelis do, the way Democrat and Republican presidents have promised to do. He did it. Don't pull out of the Iran deal. Don't sanction Iran. Don't go back. Don't hit back at Assad. And he just don't do the tax cut. He keeps doing it, not just to say, oh, gee, I can do it, but because he believes it's the right thing to do. And there's a great deal of peace and prosperity, and I think tonight, particularly in these statewide races, you saw many of the voters respond in kind. A lot of powerful and otherwise popular incumbents back at home lost tonight in their statewide re-election races. And I think that candidates and campaigns matter, and it's my very polite but firm forewarning to some of the Republican consultants in these races who've probably made a gazillion dollars this year. Congratulations to you. Before you want to blame the president and the White House in your blind quotes, remember that he was out there for many, many folks. Other folks didn't want him to campaign with them. Many of them lost tonight, I would note. And he put the economy in such a great position that anybody with an R after their name who was running was able to talk about that, according to the president. I'm just repeating what the president said here, so don't make those people lose their minds and give them something to do. So he has said that he put the economy in such a great, strong position that people, could run on that as well. And indeed, some of them did. Some refused to run with him, and some of them have lost tonight. But so there are the results. Last one.
Do you think this result can affect his foreign policy?
Do I think
the agenda policy, the foreign agenda policy?
The election results? Absolutely. So he'll have to work. The Democratic House will need to work with him. He'll continue to work with them. But this is a president who just 2.5 days from now, 3 short days from now, is leaving to go on another foreign trip, and he'll continue to do that. He'll continue to go to these multilateral meetings. He'll continue to do bilateral meetings. He'll continue to renegotiate trade deals that he thinks are very unfair to America, American workers, and American interests. And America first does not mean America alone, but it does indeed mean that national security and economic security, border security all go together, and that this president, don't count on him backing down on any of that, because he believes that to protect America as a country, American interests, Americans and American workers, he needs to have a very strong military, a very well-funded military, that we are a sovereign nation in need of physical borders. We have spent so much money over the years helping other countries protect their own borders, and it's high time we did it here.